समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In episode 1755 of Kartak Letter, we talked about how the 27th Amendment of Pakistan's constitution pretty much destroys the existing constitution vis-a-vis civil-military relations and puts the military, particularly the field marshal, fully in charge and control of the country. This is a dictator without formal office of the president or chief marshal or administrator. That said, I had also said that maybe a more substantive change is also the way in which this amendment alters the equation between the Pakistani judiciary and the executive and basically destroys the Pakistani judiciary. So nobody needs to worry about any oversight, least of all the army, because if you look at this army, if you look at Asim Munir, who's he afraid of? The one thing that he's afraid of is actually an individual, and that individual is Imran Khan, who he has jailed. Now, any judge tomorrow, any fair judge would release him. Asim Munir does not want to risk that. Now, it's also true that most of Imran Khan's own policies and views are not very different from Asim Munir's. His problem only is that he should be in charge and implementing those policies vis-a-vis India, Kashmir, Islamization, everything. And that is what makes him even more dangerous for Asim Munir and also for the current lot of political leaders, the current government, which has been appointed there and kept in power by Asim Munir. So they've gotten together to try and make sure no judge is ever able to create any problem for them or even offer any token resistance. So what does the new amendment do? Just as it almost formally puts Pakistan's Navy and the Air Force under the army, it now makes Pakistan's executive and parliament subordinate to the army. At the same time, it makes Pakistan's judiciary fully subordinated to the executive. That is the most consequential change for the Pakistanis. And that's why we've seen some protests, not too many, but some protests in Pakistan. Remember, Musharraf also ultimately fell in 2007 when he tried to mess with his judiciary and people came out on the streets. No such thing is happening right now. Probably the dictators are being helped by the fact that Op Sindoor is still so new and people still have a security consideration in their minds and they are hesitant and they are thinking. However, in the course of time, you might see some more protests because thinking people in Pakistan are already talking about this, writing about this. I mentioned to you the two columns by Zahid Hussain and Maliha Lodhi. I'll quote a couple of lines from Maliha Lodhi. Her column is headlined Slide into Authoritarianism. She talks about how the 27th Amendment shows democratic regression, her words. This is now going to set up executive compliant, it's hyphenated, executive compliant courts. Interesting expression, isn't it? That hyphenated executive compliant. And this finishes the job the 26th Amendment had left incomplete. Now, what the 26th Amendment does, and we featured this in episode 1522 in 2024, September 20, I think. Of course, we'll share a link with you with the description. You can check that out. That was September 20, 2024. So then also there was a similar attempt to push these changes with the judiciary. Munir could not fully have his way because of protests and pushbacks, although driven by the fear that some judge will one day free Imran Khan, he tried his best. The problem was, and Munir's fear was, that one after the other, and that was also Shehbaz Sharif's fear, that one after the other, Imran Khan was being acquitted or discharged in the various cases lodged against him. The army did not want him out. So first, with the 26th Amendment, they reduced the powers of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. They took away the writ jurisdiction of the High Courts, for example. Then also, the army wanted to set up a federal constitutional court which would then cut the Supreme Court into half. Then Supreme Court of Pakistan will only hear cases of criminal and civil nature. Any constitutional challenges would go to Federal Constitutional Court. That was thwarted then because of the pushbacks. So what did they do? They did not fully abandon the project. They found a middle path. The middle path was that every High Court and Supreme Court of Pakistan would now have independent constitutional benches, independent permanent constitutional benches. These are not judges floating from one bench to the other, fixed constitutional benches. It's not like in India where in Supreme Court the Chief Justice sets up a constitutional bench. Not like that. These will be pre-appointed benches and all constitutional cases will only go to them. So that was the middle path. Now that is over with this amendment, 27th. Now Pakistan will set up a new Federal Constitutional Court or FCC. This effectively means it will have two Chief Justices, one of the Supreme Court and second of the FCC. Either of them can be higher in their order of seniority in terms of the number of years served, etc. That's all kept vague. In any case, the 26th Amendment had already taken away the writ jurisdiction of the High Courts, but now Supreme Court also will not have it and will not have any jurisdiction of constitutional writs. It will go straight to Federal Constitutional Court. This makes two parallel Supreme Courts and both will be under Judicial Commission of Pakistan, which will have 13 members and see who these 13 members will be, because this will be very different from India's collegium or even what was proposed under India's National Judicial Accountability Commission, NJAC. This will have 13 members including about 6 judges. I will tell you why I said about 6 judges. Then the Federal Law Minister, Attorney General of Pakistan, 2 members of National Assembly and 2 senators, nominated half and half by the ruling party and opposition. How much opposition there is in Pakistan, we know. That is also something we'll talk about some other day. One advocate, besides these members, one advocate from the Bar Council on a 2-year rotational basis, then one woman member or a non-Muslim member appointed by the Speaker of the National Assembly. That is how the council will be constituted. Now this will then sit on the appointment and transfer of judges everywhere. I will explain to you, as I told you, why I said about 6 judges, because this is the composition of this 13-member committee now, before the Federal Constitutional Court has been set up. Once the FCC comes in, then I am sure some judge or judges will come in from there as well. That's why I said about 6 judges, because we don't exactly know what will happen. Now this will empower the government to transfer any judge from any place to another, from Supreme Court to Constitutional Court, Federal Constitutional Court, or vice versa, from one High Court to another. What this means is, the moment a judge seems difficult with any case, he or she will be moved to another court. And if the judge refuses to take the transfer, the judge will be considered to have retired immediately. That's in the constitution now. That means the upshot is that the executive now takes over the judiciary. That's what Maliha Lodi means in her column when she says this will create an executive compliant judiciary. And she says, in any case, since the 26th Amendment, government has won all the cases with the judiciary, because who would dare to stand up to the government now? Now see the amendments that have been made. Looks like it's one amendment. It's a 26-page amendment document. I will share a link with you. But hold your breath or fasten seat belts as I list for you the articles in the Constitution that are being amended through this one amendment. To start with, Article 42nd, 59th, 63rd, 68th, 78th, 81st, 93, 100, 114, 130, 165, 170, 175. We are not done yet. I'm taking a pause at 175 because 175 and 175A are very important, because under these, besides these, a whole new chapter 1A has been added under chapter 1 of the Constitution. This defines the Federal Constitutional Court. Then we resume our listing of other amended articles with just this 26-page amendment. Article 176, 177, 178, 179, 180, 182, 183, 184, 185, 186, 187, 189, 190, 191, 192, 193, 199, 200, 202. Now 200 is what gives the power of transfer of judges to the National Judicial Commission. Then the big daddy of all, Article 243. Article 243 is the one which we explained in episode 1755. That's the one that defines the relationship between the Pakistani civilian elected government and the armed forces. Now, many of these are also tiny amendments. When I list all these sections, when I list all these articles, many of these are also tiny amendments because it says in place of Pakistan, this will appear or that will appear. This, however, gives us an idea. This count gives us an idea of what a sweeping job the Pakistanis have done of amending the constitutional system and also formally changing their division of powers and responsibility. What Zahid Hussain says that this completely obliterates the earlier trichotomy of power, that is parliament, executive, judiciary. I might be a little bit confused whether he means parliament, executive and judiciary, or he considers parliament and the executive together and he means a civilian government, judiciary and the army. I don't know, but he says that trichotomy is now completely over, and I'm saying this, that a new hierarchy is clearly, fully established. To summarize, I will quote a para from Maliha's article. She says this is part of a broader pattern of Pakistan's slide into an undemocratic system. But as the country's history shows, aggrandizement of power and manipulation of law, her words, aggrandizement of power and manipulation of law, see it on your screen, neither makes a government secure nor guarantees its future. It only exposes its lack of self-confidence and faith in democracy. Now the interesting or the ironical thing is that while the army wants it done, it's the elected civilian government that's bringing the machine gun for its own massacre. You are basically implementing their agenda. They are implementing the army's agenda, and it's the agenda of their own political demise. The constitution that has emerged out of this amendment is a complete apology for the 1973 original. Its destruction began with Zia-ul Haq. First, he suspended it, then he brought it back, but put in the 8th Amendment, which gave him the power to dismiss any elected leader, but also dismiss any elected parliament, state assemblies, provincial assemblies, as these are called in Pakistan. Why did he do that? Because he was under pressure to bring in some kind of a democracy. Earlier on, he used to say, I know democracy is very good for everybody, just as exercise is very good for everybody. But you tell a sick man who's hospitalized, but is exercise also good for a sick man who's hospitalized, who's so sick that he has to be hospitalized? So my country is so sick, it's like being in hospital. How can it get democracy? Earlier, he used to fob it off like that. But then pressures grew. So he thought, like Ayub, he will also create a democracy of some kind. So he created a partyless democracy. For that, he needed a constitution. So he restored the 1973 constitution, but gave himself the power to fire his prime minister, his chief ministers, his elected MPs, MLAs or MNAs and MPAs as these are called in Pakistan, members National Assembly and members Provincial Assembly at any time. Nawaz Sharif's government repealed that when they had a majority in 1997. That amendment survived a long time, and using that amendment, elected Pakistani prime ministers were fired by the president Ghulam Isa Khan multiple times. Nawaz Sharif repealed that in 1997. That became the 13th amendment of the Pakistani constitution, which repealed the 8th amendment. After that, Musharraf came, and Musharraf restored the 8th amendment by another name. To begin with, as he took over power, he abrogated the 1973 constitution, set up the office of chief executive, which is the office he held initially, then he became president. Then he brought back the 1973 constitution because once again he faced pressures to restore democracy. Because you know why? It might have been mostly partyless. In fact, the party that mattered was called King's Party because it's a party that he himself vicariously or indirectly set up. He even needed protection from that, and he even needed the same power over that Zia had given himself. And in 2010, again an elected government in Pakistan, this time PMLN, that is Nawaz Sharif's party, and PPP, the Bhutto family's party, were together, and they brought in the 18th Amendment to again restore those powers to the Prime Minister and took away the dismissal power of the President. Now with these changes, the equation is again reversed. In fact, I would say that, and I'm reading a lot of it in Pakistani media, that Pakistani army and the powers that be, the establishment would like to abrogate 18th Amendment as well to take away these powers of the Prime Minister, and also because the 18th Amendment involved devolution of financial powers and taxes as awarded by the Pakistan Finance Commission to the provinces, to the states, because the Pakistani army wants more resources. The federal government says we are not left with much money, so much money goes to the provinces. Now provinces have a point of view because Pakistan People's Party, which is not participating in the government but which is supporting the government, without which Shehbaz Sharif's government cannot survive. Their survival depends on their control of their control and popularity in Sindh, so they want their resources. The army does want this 18th Amendment deleted, repealed, so once again the federal government will have all the power and they'll be able to get more funds allocated to themselves. But you know what? These are usually the situations of objects in the mirror being closer than they seem.